Hello, Deborah with Preservation Publications and Preservation 2012 on YouTube. Between March of 1951 and June of 1967, there were several oil supply disruptions that had relatively minor effects on the growth and productivity of the United States. We were an independent, oil-producing nation at the time, and in spite of the disruptions, our economy thrived. It is estimated that somewhere between 1969 and 1973, the United States reached peak oil production in the lower 48 and began importing up to 3.2 million barrels of oil per day. This did not mean that the United States had run out of oil, however. It meant that it had reached that point in production where the 3.2 million barrels were cheaper to purchase from outside the U.S. than to produce inside. It's also at this point that America's dependency on foreign oil began. During the 6 Days War, we openly supported Israel against its Arab neighbors, which just also happened to be the oil-producing countries we came to rely upon. Our political policies and actions throughout this period did not reflect the adage, "Do not bite the hand that feeds you," however, and would soon come back to haunt us. In 1972, the United States was importing 4.5 million barrels of oil per day, and by 1973 that had increased to 6.2 million barrels per day. But it wasn't until 1973 that our thirst for and dependence upon foreign oil became apparent. Being angry at the United States' support of Israel, the Arab oil exporting nations demonstrated their power over the U.S. by implementing an oil embargo. During this period of time, gas prices went up 30 cents to about $1.20 per gallon, while the cost of crude oil quadrupled. Anyone that was of age during this period can tell you about getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get into long lines at gas stations that didn't open until 8, and how people literally died while waiting in lines to get the gas they needed to deal with their emergency. Gas stations ran out of fuel and shortened their hours of operation, and purchases were restricted to 5 gallons at a time. At the same time, unemployment rate rose to about 7.2%, and there were many recessions all over the country. The U.S. never fully recovered from this initial shock, and in many ways it has simply been reacting to subsequent shortages and shocks ever since. In 1976, there was a civil war in Lebanon and the disruption of Iraqi exports. The unemployment rate was about 7.9%, reflecting a loss of 500,000 jobs here. Total energy consumption was reduced by 8.8% due to an increase in energy prices, which helped ease the demand a bit, and between 1974 and 1977 the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System was built and increased U.S. oil production by 2 million barrels per day, again helping to ease demand. But soon our political policies and actions came back to haunt us once again. We had supported the rule of the Shah of Iran over the populist cleric, the Ayatollah Khomeini, and as a result, in 1979, OPEC held up oil production that caused gas prices to rise by 50% in the United States. Again, as a result, there were gas lines, gas rationing, increased unemployment, and many recessions all over the country. It is believed that somewhere between 2003 and 2007 the world reached global peak oil production. Again, this does not mean that the oil ran out. It means that from that point on, getting the oil out of the ground was going to be costly and dangerous. It also meant that due to the high costs of production, supply would slowly diminish and what was produced would become exceptionally expensive to purchase. In 2001, the United States invaded Afghanistan, strategically positioning itself on the western border of Iran and on the northern border of Pakistan. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq and took possession of its oil reserves, which had the effect of temporarily pushing back the inevitable suffering that comes with oil withdrawal. At the same time, the U.S. strategically positioned itself on Iran's eastern border. Keep in mind that the last 50 years have taught us that political and economic disturbances in the Middle East create oil production shortages, supply disruption, and oil shocks. Now look at the Middle East and North Africa. Do you see anything but political and economic disturbances right now? Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Algeria, Djibouti, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Sudan, Syria, Tunisia, and the Palestinian territories are all in revolt. Fascism is running amok, and because of all this, we are about to find out exactly what oil shock truly means. The federal government is staying rather quiet about the revolution, which is out of character, but I bet you an Indian head nickel they're feverishly running around trying to figure out how they're going to keep the supply of oil we need to function pouring into the country. You know the saying, it ain't over till the fat lady sings? Well, the fat lady is still a 100-pound willow and hasn't even taken her first voice lesson yet. Get ready. Now, you can call this mess peak oil or anything else you'd like, but just note this, it's all about to get very bad very quickly. Please, order your family supply of heirloom seeds and start preparing your garden. Also, what you cannot grow in your backyard, try and stock up on, such as sugar and oil. Until next time, for our families, our neighbors, our friends, and our communities, preservation.